Ansary here, bringing you another Archon podcast. This one I'm rather excited about. And so I'm sharing with you what I believe to be a very strong potential truth. It doesn't mean that I understand everything. But at this point in my life and where I'm staying, what's going on with me, I feel that this is the topic that I need to focus on. And I need to release this information and share this with the few that are listening. Of course, we're going to talk about the sun in this podcast. Not so emotionally charged, dealing with, heartbreak and, relationships and men and women and all that stuff. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about that. But I want to center this with a deep breath. Okay, we're going to start talking more about meditation. Take a deep breath. Okay, and just relax. Some of you have heard some of the things that I've talked about in relation to the sun, societal change, and solar cycles, or solar epochs. I'm just going to try to sum up everything that I can. So, what I think is taking place with each solar cycle, which is on average about every 11 years, not exactly, sometimes 9 to 13. The concentration of the sunspots, an increase in CMEs impacting the Earth, an increase in geomagnetic storms, a natural cycle. Okay, science understands more about how we are biologically impacted by the sun than they admit. This whole thing going on with CERN, coming around September 2015, is occurring at an expected completion of the solar cycle, sunspot cycle number 24. Despite the articles you read about the sun being dead, we're not getting a lot of, we just had about 48 hours to 72 hours of back-to-back geomagnetic storming. One of the reasons I'm off grid is that for this period in time, where we're seeing lots of solar flares and sunspots and wild behavior in human beings as a result, it's better for me to be out here. It's better for me to do these podcasts and work through my own energy and go through my own healing process or whatever, vision quest process. Go out in nature and ground. There's a reason why I'm doing this during this time period. And it is because we're at solar maximum. So what I've identified after coming across the research of several others, like Dr. Burl Payne, like Alexander Chivinsky, and learning about the reality that major world wars correlate with peaks in solar cycles. Being someone that has investigated the conspiratorial angle of things, we can look at events like 9/11. We can look at the invasion of Iraq. We can see at these controlled New World Order events of our last decade occurred at specific periods of sunspot cycle 24. We can look back at sunspot cycle 23. We can look at sunspot cycle 22. We can see events that have already come to pass. Major protest periods. The LA riots is one major event that took place. And I believe that would be sunspot cycle 22. You're looking at the year 1992, a period of a lot of gang violence. So throughout my life and research, looking at patterns, looking at history, I can identify periods where I recollect more stories about gang violence, drug addiction, sex trafficking, worlds at war. With periods where we can see an increase in sunspots, solar maximum. So let's talk... We have the late 60s, the whole, flower children generation, all the LSD, all the people tripping, because there's a huge effect on the sunspots and consciousness and lucid dream states and changes in the fluid in the brain, which we'll talk a little bit more about. But you have the late 60s to the early 70s. You have the late 70s leading to the early 80s. You have the late 80s, 89, leading to 92, 93. And everything that happened in that period. You have 1999, 2000, and all the anxiety and catastrophobia about Y2K taking place then. as we look back at the history of the tape, what was going energetically, the drug epidemic, the 2000s, the World Bank protest, solar maximum, it was going down, and people were writing articles about the sunspots then. And then we had 9/11. And we had the invasion of Afghanistan shortly after. The invasion of Iraq of 2003. We're going into solar minimum by 2004. They got what they wanted and into the countries by that period of time. We see a period of semi-apathy within society. When are people going to wake up? The Occupy movement of 2011. Sunspots all of a sudden are starting up same time period. No shit. We see a major sunspot around the time of Fukushima. HAARP may have been involved, but no doubt they were harnessing the natural powers, primal powers of the earth caused by the sunspots, if there was some sort of tampering that led to Fukushima, which is obviously a mass contamination event affecting the health of women, affecting the health of men, and I would say more in certain parts of the U.S. than others. I would say the West Coast being an area that we can clearly see more contamination, even though some of the stuff is known to travel much farther. I do believe that the articles coming out is that there is a higher concentration of radiation along the shores, along the oceans, and elsewhere on the West Coast. Areas in Oregon, areas around Portland. And so I've been looking at this for a number of years, the false flag events, the wars, and the social response, increasing crime within society, increase in theft, increase in drug use, and attributing this to the sun. Not to blame the sun, we have different ways of responding to the sun which boost the natural energy that's already in us. The pineal gland within the human brain, obviously tied to the sixth sense, dreams, lucid dream states, perhaps paranormal. There's obviously a link there with the melatonin production in the brain and how it's regulated by the sun. So a lot of different reports that I've read over the years has kind of connected the dots for me. That, human beings as we are and whatever's going on with us is activated, magnified, powerful when our bodies are experiencing the geomagnetic storms, which is caused when the solar flares impact our Earth's magnetic field. And we're going through a time period where the Earth's magnetic field is getting weaker and thinner, which means that we're going to become increasingly impacted physically by these solar storms. And is it a positive thing or is it a negative thing? We really need to look at how we look at what's going on and not look at it from a position of worry. No, I don't think we need to be afraid of the sun. I think that we're going to continue to have a conversation about harnessing the power of the sun, how we can use the power of the sun to protect ourselves and heal ourselves, and maybe how we need to be looking objectively at the sun, how the sun may also be something that energizes or powers up the Archons. If in fact those are archonic entities that are going in and out of the sun, as many people have seen on YouTube. I am by no means an expert in the Sophic myth or the Nagamati. I've been told by several others, I've heard others say, that the Archons come from the sun. And it does make logical sense to me that the sun is it's a provider of life to many entities, if not all, including those that which we do not see, including those that we might see ourselves as parasitic over. In the same way that a hunter hunting deer may be powered by the sun is merely a power source. It does not mean that in no way demonizing hunting or meat eating, but simply saying one form of life could be preying on another form of life coming from the sun. Parasitic entities like those which are called the Archons could very well be powered up during these solar cycles, increased geomagnetic storms, interfacing the world of the Archons with the world of human beings even more. It can be a spiritual time for mankind, when we have these solar flares and we're connected with our spirit. It also is a time that could make us juicier, a little more valuable, a higher commodity. There's many uses for solar power. You can have solar power, and there's many uses for that solar power. You can power up something that can hurt someone, I suppose, or do someone damage, or you can use your laptop to get on the internet and you can troll people and you can act like a maniac. or you can use the power in those solar panels to power up some tools to help you build a house, to get on the internet or upload a video that might help open minds. Or you can be another zombie and you can use that solar power and you can play violent video games like some sort of mind-controlled freak. You know, I've tried to be polite in the past talking about video games. People really take offense when you criticize violent video games. It's almost like, really? It's to that point? Well, that's reflective of some sort of unhealthy obsession with fantasizing about killing other people. Maybe that archonic programming is feeling threatened. So maybe we need to talk about that a little bit more. But what we focus on does increase, although there are some wacky interpretations of that in the New Age movement. For the sake of this discussion, solar flares bring in change. And so there's change taking place in our world. We're powered up. We have the ability to create. We have the ability to destroy. Our minds may be extra activated. So we may be able to develop certain powers. We may be extra capable. We may have amazing ideas. Now, will those ideas be used to destroy aspects of mankind and hurt and maim? Or will that energy, those ideas, will that consciousness be used for positive purposes, breakthroughs for humanity? People plotting against the systems of control instead of giving their life to it and acting like a possessed maniac. You know, like some song from Metallica, acting like a maniac, whiplash, yeah. And so I feel like I've witnessed that aspect of the crazy, dark masculine possessed by the war spirits. And this is what's happening with Archon staging wars during solar peaks and using technology, saying this enemy hits you. Now all this aggression that we've already pre-programmed you through Hollywood, through the 1980s, through the movies, through the 1990s, through the rock music. You just want to release like an orgasm. Here, let us do you a favor. Boom, here's 9/11. Here's a job for you and your family. We need you to go overseas. We need to kick down doors. And you know what? Along the way, we need you to come back with old Babylonian spirits that we woke up with the bombs in our Shakana campaign. We need a couple, in fact, we need as many hitchhike, piggyback motherfuckers as we can. And you know what? They haven't even sent millions over there yet. Maybe they have. Maybe it's more than they're admitting. But this isn't over yet. And you're dealing with the old land. You're dealing with old Babylon over there in Afghanistan and Iraq. And many other people have noticed this as well. The idea of Archon hijack spirits or the jinn or American soldiers bringing back things with them. Things they bought in certain bazaars where they were openly told, yeah, you're basically buying a jinn. And the soldier comes back thinking it's all cool and whatnot, and maybe being open to working with this jinn. Maybe they can get something from this association with this entity, simply through the belief and the willingness to work with that spirit. And then all of a sudden you start reading stories about mass suicides. You start reading stories about, some people coming back and acting like they're possessed and killing their families, or engaging in some shootout, or doing the suicide by cop thing. So stressed out with reality and whatever happened to them and is now happening with them with this entity, that instead of healing, they're actually doing a suicide by cop. They're killing their family. They're killing themselves. They're actually feeding the Archons in the semi-all-you-can-eat buffet. During periods in which we're seeing more solar flares, the very thing that activates the spirit, basalts aside, there's something going on they are not telling people in the media. So you go to spaceweather.gov and you look at when there's a geomagnetic storm, and when you look at articles that are going on where it's like a face-eating attack, or the rise of the dark feminine, some mother killing her kids, some crazy shit you're not used to hearing. Boom, you see the pattern, geomagnetic storms. And then you look in the other direction, you pull back the other curtain, false flag event, Virginia shootout. Ooh, the black guy didn't like white people. We've got another shooting. We've got another false flag event. All happening during a period of a geomagnetic storm. Not to mention, what is it, Storm Erica? That's the latest focus. Noting the link between solar flares and storms. Now, storms in the air. Again, I speculate. I am being truthful with where I'm speculating, and in the act of asking the question, I seek to find the truth as to where the Archons are interacting with the solar flares and possessing humankind, and where the Archons or Lucifer or the world up there in the sky trying to control the world down here, the world of the Archons, the world of the non-physical. The world that, observing Earth from above the Earth, but literally not being able to come this close to the Earth's energy because the Earth's energy is just so powerful. And thinking about the amount of focus of things in the air that are only in the air, that are not grounded, that people see sometimes with their eyes, that move around and have different shapes and different interpretations, things of the air, things people have worshipped over time and have believed to be gods. Things of the air that supposedly have commanded aspects of humankind throughout history that have come and gone, different cycles of mankind, rise and fall of civilization tied to cycles of the sun. Major cycles of the sun. So you have the 11-year cycle, and you have other cycles dealing with fertility. Why would fertility be important to the gods or the so-called controllers of this realm? Because they have a vested interest in harvesting the energy of the human beings through different epochs, keeping them in a state of slavery, in a state of bondage, warring with this other group from this other land that is under its own psychosis, maybe pushing a religion, maybe pushing a government doctrine, but they're pushing another version of the same archonic system. And I do believe it's been happening for thousands of years. Absolutely. That which we fight against is beyond flesh, but is above spirit, is of spirit, and of a wicked spirit. And that's why these nationalistic bubbles and Democrat versus Republican and racial lines and man versus woman, this is all part of the archonic plan. So during periods where our spirits are boosted, I see the greatest attempt through the media and staged events to keep us upset and in a state of emotional turmoil when these solar flares are happening. And so the mindful way is to be in a state of meditation during these periods, to boost your own energy, to heal yourself, to use this extra energy coming in a very specific way. Those that don't even understand about how the sun impacts us, how archons and maybe their interface with humans may be boosted during that period, leading to more possessions in human beings that have a weak field, that are left unprotected. So one person could be having a spiritual experience with a protected field, and they're in a state of bliss. Meanwhile, somebody else is getting zapped, who's been a lifelong drunk. He's now, for whatever reason, to deal with the energy, doing more meth than ever, and he is embarking on a crime spree, and he is disemboweling his victim. He's cutting his victim's guts open all over a bike. Have I read stories just like this during solar flares in Portland? Also noting the rise in certain parts of the planet, or Portland being like a microcosm of a larger picture, cities that seem to be more affected with crimes of passion during solar flares. And so looking at it from the microcosm, from drive-by shootings to sexual assaults to wild, violent crimes in Portland, to other things taking place with people moving from point A to point B, having a flood of energy. In some cases, people hooking up and having babies. For people that are in that scene, that are out there meeting people and rubbing elbows and whatnot. Not to try to be comical, but it's a period where energy is moving and it is flowing and it is powerful and it is neutral. To bring this down to a balancing point of a calm, clear thought. The sun brings massive energy. It boosts what's ever there, and it's neutral. You have archons using that energy, manipulating the psychic energy, turning people against each other, and you have also other people that are aware of what's going on some level. And they're protecting themselves, and they're healing themselves, and they're going out in nature, and they're not letting the archons control them, whether they're aware of the archons or not. They're seeking to self-heal on a subconscious level. So sometimes people migrate to a new place or a new city when there are solar flares because they're being led somewhere. And it could be a form of control that is not friendly. Led somewhere to where their energy could be harvested. And there can be other times to where that's not the case, to where they're leaving somewhere to where their energy is being harvested and they're going somewhere that's going to be better for them. I think that we are so unique as human human individuals and personalities, that we actually have different biological responses to different parts of the planet at different times. And so it is in our nature to be nomadic, and the sun brings that out in us. It brings out that nomadic move and travel to another spot because the energies are changing on the planet. But while that's taking place, we can also be misled as to where is the right place to move. We can be misled, and there could be people that are placed in our path by the Archons that pretend to be our friends, or there could be other things that take place that deal with our own ego, being misled by our lower senses. And we can be led in certain directions and into the arms of certain people, which we should not go. It's like, do not go, if only you knew, So we are now in a period of heavy solar flare activity with just the last couple of weeks. I'm assuming that life in the city is very wild right now, with a lot of energy and a lot of thoughts going in a lot of different directions. And I just want to center on this topic that the sun is neutral. There's a lot of energy going in different directions. We have a magnifying factor of whatever is already going on within you and whatever is already going on in the world. So it really is a time of being in control of your own thoughts and protecting yourself from mind control. And understanding the way of the insusceptible, which your homework is to Google the word insusceptible and just kind of see what's out there, maybe the origins of the word insusceptible. I remember when I was 12 years old, I wrote or drew a little comic featuring a superhero called the Insusceptible. And the way I came about finding the word insusceptible is I was in detention, I think, for something ridiculous at the age of 11 or 12, and I opened up a large dictionary with the intention of finding a word that would describe the superhero. And the superhero's name was insusceptible, not able to be easily influenced or programmed. And we'll see what else you might come up with in search of the term insusceptible. But there's a major change that takes place in the human body in conclusion when the earth is bombarded with these powers of the sun. And so it's a birth and death cycle. And it has a mindful and what we call like a negative result based on the consciousness of the person going through that solar bombardment. I do believe people can become superheroes and develop powers of the mind and create wonderful projects, and the list goes on. And they can also be duped into wild acts of violence. They can be controlled. They can be possessed. Their energy could be hijacked if they're relinquishing their sovereignty. So the periods where we're going through the solar flares are periods where people seem to be doing soul searching or dabbling in certain substances and confused about relationships because of what's going on with the pineal gland and other factors, the major shifts in melatonin in conjunction with whatever's going on planetarily, whatever's going on with the other aspects of the stars to bring in astrology and other planets. Full moon, super moons. We're having a super moon right now, and I think that this is a good time for me to explore these ideas. So all this is information that people can use. Being aware of the game. Being aware that in this biological, spiritual matrix, when the sun is spitting at the earth, which we are on right now, whether you view that as blessed to be on or trapped on, we're on it, and we're affected by it. But we aren't the only thing that's being affected by the solar flares. I think on some way, shape, or form, the Archons in the sky, through the geomagnetic storm activity, the electromagnetic spectrum. There's even articles I've read that says that there's more ghost hunting going on during geomagnetic storms. For me, the dots are being connected. They're alive and they're hungry. And through the unmindful actions of man, the war, the killing, that's a lot of suffering released into the astral plane. It's a lot of pain through the rapes, the killing, the souls that are going in and out of the earth. The souls are going into the earth that are babies whose energies can be harvested, and the souls leaving the earth through the act of murder and death, killings brought upon by Hitler of the day, all food for the Archons. It may sound complicated, it may sound cruel, but the human beings have also created a very cruel world for other animals that have no idea what the world of mankind is like. All they know is what life is like in their cage. And I see the human species, the modern human male, the modern human female, as being no different than the animal in the cage that does not understand the nature of the shepherd. Well, there's an archonic shepherd over humankind that uses the power of the sun to use the excess and mindful energy to move things, to dupe mankind into destruction in order to create more food. Meanwhile, there could be other things going on the planet dealing with angels and dealing with miracles, and I do not deny that. But that is also a world greatly shrouded in mystery, because I seek to bring a little bit of clarity to the discussion. When it comes to whether or not certain spirits are helping us or hurting us, it is important that one is not unmindfully working with spirits from other dimensions or universe simply because they're spirits that are willing to talk to them, that they are able to hear. I think that's fairly primitive. And so when you have a very strong link between the spirit world and the world of human beings, human men, human women, and there's channeling going on, and there's people basically taking commands from the other side, even if they don't know if there's a voice inside their head, there could be a voice inside their head that they think really represents themselves, which in fact is something that has taken control of them and is hiding behind their own thoughts that does not want to be detected. And so it is because of this reason and more, the link between the human field and the spirit realm, that unless one is protected, we do see a rise in possessed, warlike, drug-like, self-destructive, anti-human behavior during solar flares. It's because it's food for the Archons, and they have gotten results over and over and over again, and by and large, the human species isn't even aware of the solar cycle influence over human behavior, much less a potential additional element that the Archons are using the solar flares to affect and direct human consciousness, when in reality, we should be much more mindful as to how we're grounding and using and directing our energy during these solar peaks, of which we're in right now. I'm Alex Ansary. Thank you for listening to this podcast. We will be back with more.